Be seated. Yasher Koach to Nathan. We turn now, as we put aside our Sidurim, we take up the Eitz Chaim Chumashim, or you can download a link from your eShofar to this morning's Torah reading. Today, if we were in Shul, would be a triple header, a triple Torah Shabbat, as we like to call it, the solar eclipse of Shabbatot, a trifecta. As it is not only Shabbat Parashat Mishpatim, it is Rosh Chodesh, and it is Shabbat Shekalim. So it's a triple Torah Shabbat, one of our most favorite Shabbatot, as we get to read from 3 Torah scrolls, and the way the tradition has it, we read 6 aliyot from Shabbat Mishpatim. The 7th aliyah is the Rosh Chodesh reading, and then the special maftir for Shabbat Shekalim. I want to start by talking about Parashat Mishpatim, which at first glance is not that exciting. It's just a potpourri of laws and rules and regulations. And as you read it, you're just like, what is all this? How do I make any sense of it? How do I even find any order or structure amidst all these laws? And I want to offer you a teaching that I offered to our Parshat HaShavua. Every Thursday from 12:30 to 1:30, we have a great group that comes together on Zoom, also on Facebook Live, if you prefer Facebook. And I tried to present a teaching that deals with something that our world is really lacking these days. And I found this even before the pandemic. But of course, the pandemic has only increased this dramatically. And what are we lacking? We're lacking a basic human quality, something that is fundamental to how we interact, to how we build a moral society, to how we create communities of kindness, of love. It is the most basic quality that lies at the very core of human interactions. It is empathy. And if we're missing empathy, then we can't create anything. And empathy is actually the thread that weaves its way through most of the mitzvot of this parasha. If you think about it, it's everywhere. Think about the mitzvot of this parasha, and you will see that empathy is everywhere. We find laws in 21:18. And I'm just going to jump around, so you might not be able to find them all, but trust me, they're there. 21:18, there must be justice. 23:1, you must tell the truth. 23:8, there is the laws for personal integrity. 22:13, the rules for renting and borrowing. Right at the center of all these laws, God understands that what makes a great society is empathy for each other and for God. Think about the law in 22:19. Whoever makes a sacrifice to another God and not to Adonai will be banished. At first glance, this might seem just like another classic law against idolatry and God insisting on an exclusive relationship. But as my colleague, Rabbi Noah Farkas writes, there's actually something else going on here. The Torah is showing us quite poetically that if we put our trust in idols, in something made of wood and stone and gold and silver, then we find ourselves banished from the world of other people. Idolatry is not just a belief that fortune brings us success, but that our own story of vital life requires us to worship wealth as divine. He writes, the sin of idolatry is in breaking off the life-flowing relationship with God, who cannot be seen or touched, but whose presence we can feel deeply in our bones. The Talmud remarks that committing idolatry is like being uprooted from the world, for it rips the communal human story and devolves our soul into narcissism, quoting from Masechet Sanhedrin. The Torah is telling us then that you can't separate the idea of empathy for each other from the relationship we are to have from the universe itself. If we live in a world where we deny the possibility of wonder and believe that you, an individual, are the only author of your life, then how can you possibly live life from the perspective of another human being? That is, of course, the key to the Pesach Seder, which is building to the climax of, in the middle of the Seder, at the end of the Magid section, B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirod et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. We're supposed to see ourselves as if we went out of Egypt. And if we see ourselves as if we went out of Egypt, that we were slaves, that we are strangers, then we're supposed to cultivate empathy within ourselves. And then that we find that mitzvah right in the middle of this parsha, in this reading, 22:20, which we will read this morning in the middle of the triennial reading. Do not wrong or oppress the stranger, the ger. Ki gerim heitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. This appears, according to Masechet Bava Metzia, one of the first tractates of Talmud I was taught back in 9th grade, 36 times in the Torah. Over and over again, we are taught to care for the poor, for the widow and the orphan, those who are on the fringes of society. God is asking us to extend our consciousness to an experience that is not our own. We were not strangers in Egypt. We didn't experience that firsthand, but we're supposed to manage that. We are supposed to feel that. We are supposed to somehow have that be part of our epigenetic inheritance as Jews. That's built in every day into the liturgy. We say that after the Shema. We say it everywhere. Kiddush on Friday night, everywhere. It's woven in the Exodus, because we're supposed to remember to develop a sense of empathy. We're supposed to not just walk in the shoes of those on the fringes of society, but we are supposed to live in their feet. We are supposed to cultivate empathy. That's the key. That's why the commandments in this week's parsha go on that even the enemy of our people deserves our help. And if we mistreat the poor, as it says in chapter 22, verse 22, that it's as if we are mistreating God, God's self. This is what this parsha is all about. Look through the laws and feel them this morning. They are at the very key to what it means to be a Jew, to what it means to be a human being. Cultivate a sense of empathy in yourself. As we follow along the reading on page 465, beginning with verse 4, and I'll invite my 2552 students with whom I'll be meeting in a separate link to think about why the Torah also singles out the widow and the orphan as well. Take a look at the notes that Rabbi Kushner writes both on that verse where he talks about the widow and the orphan, as well as the previous verse where he expounds on that. He has some beautiful comments for us to discuss. And all of this leads us perfectly to Refugee Shabbat, which is this Shabbat as we think about those who are pretty much most on the fringes in the world today, most in need of our empathy. Please follow along again with the reading as we begin on 465.